Well, if you look at what Bishop Cook has said, he said the work in progress. Let me follow my brother when he said about 1999. If you look at where we are today, it's like they started in 1999, laid the foundation. Some people came and took it to a decking, and some people were trying to raise it to first floor, and some people came and knocked everything down. That's the situation where we are now. Everything has been knocked down. Nothing works. And I'm somebody who can say this exemplarily. I became a governor through the court when President Obasanjo and Atiku were in government. I did not pay the court 1 naira. I was sitting in my house in the office, and the court declared me winner. When a governor is hosting them, it can't happen in Nigeria today. When I was being impeached, the president sent people to come and intervene on my behalf. Ken Namani came begging House people not to impeach me. Today, the president impeaches the person. So that is the thing. So it's collapsed. So it's failed. They were begging my house not to impeach me. And they were PDP. I was in Africa. And they were begging. President was calling me and said, Peter, are you okay? Well, even when I was impeached, President Obasanjo called me and said, are you okay? Are you safe? When I go back from the court, when court eventually declared me under Andiuba, President Yaradua called my phone in London and said, congrats. I said, President, I can't come back because, you know, if I come back, these people, he said, tell me the flight in which you're coming back. And I told him, when I came, it's the first time military people came to receive me at the airport. I couldn't believe it and took me straight to him. Now the president will ask me not to come back here again. So it's failed. Let's not talk about it. Let's talk about how we are going to rebuild it. It's collapsing.
I'm glad that my last respondent said yes and no. So hopefully we'll be able to see how we'll balance it.
Yeah, I think we are looking at democracy within the context of Africa, not just Nigeria. And I listened to the speaker very well. He talked about the challenges, but I'll go even further. I don't know whether many of us were aware of the meeting last week in Qatar between the president of Rwanda and the president of the Democratic Republic of Congo over the war that has been going on there. But what I found very striking is how the two leaders could even meet. Because a few days before that meeting, the president of Rwanda granted an interview. And in that interview, he was very brutal on the president of the Republic of Congo. He gave an anecdote that there was this report that he read somewhere that an Italian man, an Italian who lived in Belgium, said that when he was in Belgium, that the current president of Democratic Republic of Congo, Felix, was a driver for him, a delivery driver. He was selling pizza. That's according to President Kagame. So he said, the Italian man said, when I heard that Felix became the president of Congo, I laughed. Felix who couldn't deliver pizza. And I mean, it's the president of is President Kagame telling this story that you have a president in Republic of Congo, a man who was so incompetent in his early life that he couldn't deliver pizza. That's the kind of president you have. The Republic of Congo has saddled the side with. I don't think that story is true, but that's beside the point. The point really is that there are challenges for every country when it comes to management of politics. What the lesson for us is democracy is about serving the public good. It's not about the. That's why I agree to an extent with what His Excellency said. It's a work in progress. But I also agree with what His Excellency Peter Obi said, because there are also challenges that we can see within our own environment. But we have to look at both sides, the challenges as well as the prospects, and the role we can play to to make this democracy better. That's what I will say for now.
Where would you say that it is failing? If you say that it is failing,
No,
because
the problem really is not with democracy per se, it's with the operators. We all know this. I mean, the same democracy that people have been talking about in the United States for years, for decades. You can see the same democracy within the last. Can we say that the democracy we had in America in the last decades is the same democracy we have had in the last 2 months? That brings to us the role that individual can play within a system. So it's not peculiar to Africa. It's about how do we ensure that the operators play by the rules. I think that for me is the critical issue.
okay, I'm coming back to you now. I don't even know whether to say Right Honorable Tambuwal or to say Your Excellency. But I'm going to come back to you because you mentioned the operators. And I understand why, it would seem that the conversation is being localized. While I know that, the theme of the discussion we're having today is whether democracy is working in Africa. However, Nigeria is a very significant country in Africa. You have said democracy is working. There have been many times that, we've talked about how democracy we need to define what our own democracy is. We heard Bishop Kuka give a number of definitions. We also heard former President Olusegun Obasanjo give a number of definitions. But there are those who have talked about homegrown democracy, Afrocentric democracy. I don't know whether, is it the nature of the definition of democracy that is the problem here in Africa, particularly in Nigeria? Or is it, as you've said, the operators not simply wanting to play by the rules?
Well, I believe I still would go back to the same point, that even in Nigeria, it has more to do with the operators. I'll give you an example. Here in this room, seated, is former President Olusegun Obasanjo. Under his regime, state of emergency was declared in a number of states. The National Assembly, then we had Senator Pius Anyim as President of the Senate, and of course, Senator Ken Enamani and Senator David Mark. They all worked. And then, of course, Speaker Masari was also Speaker of the House of Representatives, Speaker Ete and Bankole and myself at a point. We all ensured that 2/3 majority of members of both chambers passed the emergencies in those times.
By 2/3, each member had to vote.
Each member had to vote. And you know that Parliament is guided by the Constitution, by its rules, and by precedents. In this same National Assembly, we have the same Constitution in a way, under Section 305. It has not been amended since the commencement of this democracy. We have our standing rules, and we have precedents of how 2/3 were able to be established in those instances where emergency was declared in Plateau, emergency was declared in Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe. And we stuck by the rules, and were guided by the Constitution. What happened in the last one? So I still insist that you need to check out the operators of the system.
I have asked that question because Bishop Kuka, when he was speaking, made reference to Lee Kuan Yew. And I know that you were in, is it Singapore or Thailand, very recently? Indonesia. Well, he was making reference to, trying to compare, the democracies in Africa and the democracy practiced in those countries. He made reference to Lee Kuan Yew, who was not exactly seen as a Democrat, and the reasons were given. But it has been able to deliver. Today, everybody hails the Asian tigers. They talk about the dividends of democracy in those places. People are beginning to look to China And they're wondering, why is it that their system of government is working for them? Should we be looking more to what they're doing? Because at the end of the day, what do people really want? Is it to be able to conduct elections? Or do they want their economy to be better? Do they want to feel safe in their countries? Do they want the dividends, so to speak, the freedoms that democracy assures? So that's why I asked that question about the type of democracy that we have. Do you think that we have really found the system that works for us?
Well, I would say to China, China is not the country. And I'm not going to compare ourselves with Singapore. It's a country of less than 5 million people. But I'll compare ourselves with Indonesia. Indonesia is 280 million. And coincidentally, the country with the highest number of Muslims. We should look at their democracy. They have what we call proportional representation. That is what I've always championed and we should do. You cannot have, let me even go back, no country in the past 3 years conducted election have less than 30% of registered voters participate in the election and they held it. Everyone was go and check from South Africa to Mexico to Indonesia. They were not less than 60%. Nigeria was 23% of registered voters. In that 23%, Nigeria is the only country where you can be declared a winner without 50% plus one of the vote. Our own was 37%. And there's no proportional representation, which is why you can have opposition here. Because if you had that, what is the rule of happening? Because the person there now has 37% of the vote, call it 40. In the Senate, with about 44 members. PDP, with their leader, would have had about 34 members, and Labour would have had 24. In fact, we should have a telephone government. You cannot have a minority person sitting in government, everything, chasing everybody out, destroying everything. We must change it and have proportional representation so that we get to elected. But it can't go. And when we do that, go and see it in Indonesia. In Indonesia, President's party, not the, but they have proportional representation, which brings proper checks and balances. Like he said, it's the operators. That's why I said it's fair. The argument shows that it's fair. Because the operators now have failed it. That is when we go back, it is fair.
Let's extend it across Africa. Last year in the world, over 40 elections, national elections were conducted. In Africa here, I know that a number of countries, neighboring Ghana, Senegal, we witnessed quite a number of countries go to the elections, go to the polls. It does appear that when we talk about this particular conversation, we are looking very strictly at Nigeria. What do you think we can learn? Because you have said yes and no. You have given examples of where you think it's working and where you think it's failing. What do you think when we bring this conversation home? His Excellency Toby has said we should look at Indonesia. What other African countries can we look at to say, this is working, this isn't?
I think the bottom line at the end of the day is that democracy must serve the public good. I listened to Bishop when he was talking about Indonesia, in Singapore. We easily have talked about Rwanda as a model in Africa. Because these people believe that the system is working for the majority of people. I've never been to Rwanda, but I hear a lot of good things about Rwanda. But there are also people who believe that Rwanda is not the model. So that tells you about the way people reason about this democracy system. Yeah, it's working for the ordinary people, but the elite are also considering that there are issues of human rights, there are issues of justice. So at the end of the day, there's no perfect democracy anywhere in the world. But what is essential is that government, by any means, will serve the public good. I think, for me, that's the message we should work from here.
And at this point, I have to thank the rest of the panel, His Excellency, Right Reverend Thank you so so much for being on this panel. Your Excellency, Peter Obi, thank you so much for being on the panel. And my dear continue colleague, Bishop Malini, thank you so much for being on this panel. Thank you so much, everyone.